Well, Anthony Albanese faces a growing political split over Israel after two of his Labor ministers accuse the Jewish state of war crimes. Ed Husic and Anne Ali are claiming that Palestinians are being collectively punished by Israel for the crimes of terrorists. Joining me now live is Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Keith, what should the Prime Minister do here?
Well, the history of our political system, the Westminster system, says it's all very, very clear. I think the position of Minister Husic and Minister Ali is simply untenable. We cannot have the Cabinet and the Government of Australia split on a matter like this. It's an incredibly important issue. There's significant instability around the world. We are all hoping and praying that nothing even more serious kicks off in the Middle East. And you only have to look at someone like Julian Leeser. I mean, Julian was in the shadow cabinet, not in the actual cabinet, had a difference of opinion, resigned and went and campaigned on what he thought was right. The Australian people, and rightly so, deserve a government that's united. I think this just weakens Anthony Albanese's leadership even more.
I mean, given the sensitivities surrounding this issue, as you mentioned, and given this has been a protracted conflict over a number of years, should we accept, though, that there are always going to be different views?
That's the exact point that I'm making. And on our side, the coalition, there's regularly people who have different views, but this is the Cabinet of Australia and the system is very, very clear. It is the price of being in the Cabinet that you accept the collective decision once it's made. You put forward your view, you can argue your point, but the nation of Australia, the people of Australia, need to have a united voice at the uppermost level, the highest level of government. And I think they either need to correct the record here or their position will continue to be untenable and Anthony Albanese will have to act.
So you think that they should go?
Well, unless they put forward a different view, I think that is the case. It's a decision for the Prime Minister. He's entitled to make that decision. And I am a great believer in freedom of expression and people are entitled to their views. But when you are in the Cabinet and you are in the Executive, the rules are very, very clear. You must support the Cabinet's position. Otherwise, the nation continually looks like it's divided, particularly when we're dealing with our allies around the world. And what sort of message does it send to them? I understand their position, I really do, and I feel for them and I feel for the people they represent. But as a Cabinet Minister, that is the price of sitting around the big table.
We saw, of course, the US President and now the UK Prime Minister. They've both visited Israel to stand in solidarity. Anthony Albanese has ruled out visiting Israel when he goes to the US for his trip next week. Should he reconsider, in your view, and actually go?
I agree with Peter Dutton. I think that would demonstrate very clearly Australia's support of Israel. And that is generally a united position in the Parliament, apart from the Greens and a couple of outliers. Now, I understand if Mr Albanese is not going to promote the fact that he may or may not do that, that is typical in terms of the security risk and threats that occur for Prime Ministers and others generally every other week. But I think it would be a very, very important decision to make. I think it sends a clear message and I would certainly support that if the Prime Minister chooses to do it.
What more can Australia do from here to help the situation? Joe Biden will give a speech in less than an hour from now and he's expected to call for world powers to give more funding. Should Australia do that? Should they give more funding and more security to Israel?
I'm sure DFAT and Minister Wong, Prime Minister Albanese and others are receiving requests or what's expected to be requests already. We should provide that support. We are very strong allies and friends of not only the United States, but Israel, and that's been put forward by the Prime Minister in the Parliament and in speeches this week, as it has by the opposition. And this is a time, as I've said, of a significant instability. No one wants to see a very large conflict kick off again in the Middle East. That is in no one's interests. And we need to make sure that Australia provides the support that's requested, and I would support it 100%.
All right, just want to get you on another matter now, moving on from Israel. Queensland public servants have been offered 5 days special paid leave for psychological distress if they're grieving the outcome of the Voice to Parliament referendum. What do you make of this? Is this an appropriate response?
I think Premier Palaszczuk is completely disconnected from reality. 6,000 plus public servants at 5, that's 30,000 working days paid for by the taxpayer. And the law of averages and statistics say that Not all of them voted yes, and in fact, many of them would have voted no. I think the taxpayers of Queensland deserve better. This is a Palaszczuk Labor government that's completely out of touch, whether it is on youth crime, whether it is on hospitals. I mean, this money could have been provided, for example, to fund services for maternity services at Gladstone Hospital and others, which have been shut down for many, many months, and regional people can't get the basic services they deserve. I think they've got this one wrong, Danica.
Well, we were talking just a short time ago to the Lockhart River Mayor, Wayne Butcher, and he says that there are a lot of people who are really struggling with the outcome. So what more can we do to support these people, but also to look for actual tangible outcomes to close the gap?
Well, two things. I think we need to be very clear, and I always have been, that this has been about a referendum decided by the Australian people for a change in the Constitution. It's not a reflection of their support for the Aboriginal people or otherwise. And you need to have practical measures. I mean, if the Albanese government listened to Aboriginal people and people in community, we'd still have the cashless debit card trials in the 4 sites around the country. They were overwhelmingly supported by local communities. There wouldn't have been changes on alcohol bans in the NT. We all saw what the result of that was, and they had to be put back in place. So I think you just need to have practical outcomes, and I think the Australian people recognise and understand that, and they support it. But they don't support changing the Constitution, and they did not on the weekend, overwhelmingly, to have different levels of democracy for different groups of Australians. They want us to be one people, one country, all equal.
Keith Pitt, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Great to be with you.